All right, so the latest conference is the AAC. They've gone for the 8 plus up to 4 model. And now that we've had a few conferences in the group of 5 weigh in, it seems to be their preferred method of going forward as opposed to the Power 5 conferences that are almost exclusively conference only. So, my question to you is, can the group of 5 sort of save themselves and schedule enough of these non conference games to make this work?
Hopefully, I think that's going to be the challenge because, look, one of the things that happened with the Big Ten announcement schedule this morning was they created this, what they call like a Jenga model, because they know that they need to have a lot of schedule flexibility for potential postponements. And so I think that's where the challenge is going to affect if you're doing one-offs, is these things are all going to be connected. And that's where I think you may be able to get something on a calendar. But in practicality, I don't know how many people are confident that you're going to be able to get those things to hold up. And then all of a sudden you're trying to shift games on the fly, and I just don't know how well that's going to work.
Bruce, any surprises when you saw the release of the schedule for the Big Ten this morning outside of Michigan, Ohio State not being the last game of the year?
It looks like Barry Alvarez has a lot of power in the Big Ten, because they're in the West, and they're not going to have to play Ohio State or Penn State, who are in the East. But they picked up in their crossover game Rutgers, and Rutgers has been really awful. So it's that's pretty favorable. And then you look at Maryland. Mike Loxley got a rough go of it. He got the 3 best teams from the other division on his schedule. So I mean, you look at some of these, maybe Indiana, who before in the original schedule, Indiana had 3 Group of 5 opponents in September, and one of them was UConn, which, by the way, just shut down college football this year. And the teams they ended up getting, now they got to go to Wisconsin and Ohio State, and then visit. And Penn State comes in. That's all in the month of September. So I think if you're one of these coaches, you're looking around going, man, I think I would like to get the deal that Wisconsin got.
I think it's something that Texas A&M and their fan base is going to be paying attention to whenever the SEC releases their schedule, because, Bruce, as we talked about the last couple of years, obviously playing in the SEC West, which is already a bear in itself. They had Clemson, and it seemed like this year they were going to get an easier break, but they could potentially have much tougher opponents with the SEC rescheduling.
It's a good point, right? Last year was run the gauntlet, and now people are like, oh, it's going to come around, and they're the trendy pick. And as you said, we're going to see how that's going to break after all. I mean, I can't imagine it'll be quite as hard as last year, but I think the challenge is going to be, specific to the Aggies, is I think people are looking and going, well, it's going to be a much lighter load. Well, you have 10 conference games. I mean, if you have 4 really tough games, 5 really tough games, you're not going to win all of them if you're at that level. You're not where LSU was last year. You're not where Alabama typically is. At least I don't think the Aggies are going to make that big of a jump. So I think that's the challenge they're going to face.
Bruce Feldman is our guest with Fox Sports and The Athletic. So, Bruce, now that we've seen the Power 5 conferences make their calls, and all but I think we're short the MAC and maybe the Mountain West, and then we're done. Mm-hmm. What's the next step that the schools take and the conferences take towards making sure all this works?
I think the challenge from talking to some trainers around the country has been a lot of schools feel like they have a better handle on their players navigating life with COVID, especially in their facilities, what they can and can't do when they leave, and that's they're asking them to be ultra responsible. Not just, hey, don't go to parties, don't go to bars. It's also, you got to be careful. We've heard of outbreaks that have happened when guys got together and played Madden, which is normally a pretty tame situation, but not in the days of a pandemic. So the things that I've heard that are really concerning for the medical people and the training staff people as it relates to this is going to be what happens when the regular students come back. Is that going to lead to a surge on campus, and how does that affect not just the team itself, but also, quite honestly, you got a bunch of assistants who may be 60 plus and may have some pre-existing conditions, and they're more at risk. And so I think those are things that are concerning. I think you may not hear the ADs around the country or around the SEC, advertise it this way, but I think you'll hear a lot of players encouraged to not go on campus as much as possible. And if you can take all your classes online, do it and try to minimize as much risk as you can.
Bruce, what do you think this does for the 2021 football season? I mean, Notre Dame playing in the ACC, we see all of these conferences are going to play, more conference games. Do you think this affects what we kind of see college football look like in the next year?
You mean in 2021?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it will that much, because I just don't see Greg Sankey and the SEC going, yeah, we're going to keep on playing 10 games. I know some of the fans like it and some of the TV partners like it, but that just doesn't seem like what they want, because it probably means less teams in the top 25, and it probably means some less attractive bowl records on some of the second and third tier teams in their conferences. So I don't think you would see it that way. I think one of the challenges is going to be just on the field this year, fingers crossed we're going to have a season, is that the teams that have had either A, new quarterbacks are taking over, and B, new systems that the offenses and even defenses are adjusting to, I think those are the teams that you got to keep a real close eye on to see how they transition. There could be a lot of rocky moments, because while everybody's in a similar situation in terms of what their off season may have been like, in terms of like who had the biggest learning curve, I mean, especially if you had a new staff, Mel Tucker at Michigan State, those guys weren't even there until, basically spring. So Colorado, same deal, the place he took over. So those are the ones you really are, have no idea how it's going to work for them.
Bruce Feldman is our guest. Bruce, you know Ed Orgeron as well as anybody, and I certainly want to talk about the book project here in a second. We'll flip the script, but how you spend as much time with him, how do you think he's handling this unprecedented situation?
I think he has been, he has a good relationship with the governor there. I think he's got some probably pretty good intel on what he feels like the direction. I know he has a really good relationship with his AD. And so I think in his mind, from talking to him a lot for the book, even just on the side about this, I think it's like, all right, I know I'm the football coach. I'm not the decision maker who's going to say whether we play or not or any of those other things. All I can control is, in the football building, we got to get our guys ready if we're going to have a season. Because if we do, we're gonna approach it the same way. I feel like there was a lot of turnover on the staff. He lost a lot of good underclassmen and a lot of leaders from that team last year. But I think there was an energy because of, I think he was so fired up coming out of last season. I think he feels like, you know what, these are the guys we recruited. This is the best recruiting class we've had since I've been here, which is saying a lot considering that Clyde class that he, was really his first full class there. And I think that momentum and the feeling of, hey, we have a handle on how to run the program right now. We trust our assistants, our players get it. And I think that's the part that I think they feel really good about. Now, the question is, how's the season going to unfold? Because there's so many variables going into it. But just in terms of running the ship, I think he feels really, really confident about it.
The book, Flip the Script with Ed, is scheduled to be released on October the 27th. I want to ask you.
I think it'll be a little earlier than that.
Okay. Okay. Well, the breaking news. When do you? Because we've had a lot of people ask about it. Is the reason I bring that particular date up. But how far did the story go? Does the book end with the championship, the aftermath of the championship, or did it get as deep as the NFL draft? At which point we were already dealing with COVID.
Yeah, the end of the book goes into some of the spring and what happens when you start spring. You're going to have the most high school coaches they've ever had there, and then all of a sudden, everything is going to get shut down, and it's kind of dealing with a little bit of the aftermath of that. The parts I think I'm most excited for people to see about the book is really the LSU stuff when he gets there, because I've read everything that's ever been written about him, and I've also, seen all the TV pieces, and I was like, okay, how much am I going to, my eyes going to be opened on this project? And just the detail, and it's not just, you'll see people, it's not just Ed's voice, there's a lot of other voices in here, whether it's Joe Burrow and Joe's family, from the Foster Moros to the, to to the George Munoz to you name it in the program. I mean, we've got some great detail in here from like Darius Geis and stuff that I think will really wow some people to see what actually happened, because there's just so much out there that I honestly didn't know. And I spent like the last month around the team in a lot of meetings, around those guys in the building, but just the whole ride from the time he got the job. I was really fired up about what we got in the book now that it's, almost ready to come out, just those layers. Cause I think it's not just a book that like football coaches are going to want to read. I think it's a book that anybody who is either interested in Ed Orgeron or a big SEC football fan is going to have to try to find.
Bruce, I try to tell people about the culture at LSU since Coach O's taken over, and I truly think it is special. And I've been around a lot of teams, pros, college, high school, the whole deal, and the culture that they built at LSU through Ed is completely different than really anything I have ever really seen. I mean, have you seen that being around other programs, just kind of the culture that Ed's built?
Not yet. I think you're going to see people try to replicate. I'll give you an example. I think we were on the sideline of maybe the SEC title game at the Dome, and I remembered a couple of weeks later. So I had, worked on a story for The Athletic about that and wrote it, and had a couple of OU assistants I saw before the Peach Bowl, and they were like, do they really only do this, this, and this? And it was like really about how the program runs in terms of not a lot of long meetings as big staffs and just not a lot of wasted time. And because they were like, we've never heard of stuff like that. And I think what's interesting to me, Jacob, is when people think of like an innovative coach, they may think of Lincoln Riley, or they may think of an X and O's guy, or they think of Sean Payton, or obviously they thought of, Joe Brady in this regard. I think one of the things that's interesting is I don't think people realize how innovative Orgeron is, because the stuff he's been on the forefront of is how he runs a team. The fact of like how he gets a team ready for Saturdays. And that's actually the most important thing, because you're dealing with, as you're dealing with 18, 19, 20-year-olds, and his team last year was always ready to be at their best. You can't say that about most teams. I mean, look, Ohio State had as much talent as anybody the last 5 years. There was a couple of Saturdays, whether it was against Iowa or Purdue or some other teams, they weren't anywhere near their best, right? And they had a great coach, but I think that speaks to what you're talking about, the culture. And that culture didn't happen in 2019. It took a while to get there. And I think when people Flip the Script, they will see how long and how many, like maybe 2 steps forward, 1 step back it was to get that culture in place.
All right. We did have a question about pre-orders from the book, and you said it may come out a little bit earlier. When do you think the earliest might be?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
We had a question about how to pre-order the book, and when that you said it may be an early release date, when that might be.
Yeah, I think it's like you can go to Amazon.com now and pre-order it. Just search Flip the Script and Ed's name, and you should be able to pre-order it then. I mean, I think one of the things that's been challenging is initially I think we had talked about getting the book around SEC Media Days. Well, obviously SEC Media Days wasn't going to happen. And then it's been a little bit, I think, hopefully when the start of the season is kind of up and running, I think then people should be able to get their hands on the book shortly thereafter. So it's exciting. We have The Rock, who did a forward for the book. And there's just a lot of voices in there, in addition to Ed's perspective, that I think will lend a lot to the reader.
Looking forward to reading it, Bruce. We appreciate your time today. We'll look forward to talking with you soon. Thanks a lot for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.